Thank you for being here today. Group 6 is here to present to you the history of special education in the Philippines. Historical background from 1902 to year 2000. I'm Cielo G. Mendoza.
I am Molly Ann B. Bonifacio.
I am Jen and C. Labao.
Before we proceed to the history of special education in the Philippines, let me first read the aims and objectives of special education. To develop all social, vocational, communication skills for persons with disability. To develop basic living skills for activities of daily living or ADL, such as bathing, eating, grooming, toileting, etc. To develop fine motor and gross motor skills. To become vocationally independent. And to enhance thinking, coordination, and psychomotor activities in terms of occupation. Now, let's proceed to the history of special education in the Philippines. Historical background from 1902 to year 2000. In 1902, the interest to educate Filipino children with disabilities was expressed for more than a century that was pinpointed by Fred Atkinson. Historically, the interest to educate Filipino children with disabilities was expressed more than a century ago in 1902 during the American regime. The General Superintendent of Education, Mr. Fred Atkinson, reported to the Secretary of Public Instruction that deaf and blind children were found in a census of school-aged children in Manila and nearby provinces. He proposed that these children be enrolled in schools like the other children. Special education started in the Philippines in 1907 with the establishment of Insular School for the Deaf and the Blind, a residential school located in Pasay City, Metro Manila. Miss Delia Delight Rice, an American educator. However, it was not until 1907 when the special education program formally started in the country. The Director of Public Education, Mr. David Burrows, worked for the establishment of Insular School for the Deaf and the Blind in Manila. Miss Delight Rice, an American educator, was the first administrator and teacher of the special school. Now let's talk about the year 1926 to 1949. The Philippine Association of the Deaf, or the PAD, composed mostly of hearing-impaired members and special education specialists, was founded in 1926. The following year, in 1927, the government established the Welfareville Children's Village in Mandaluyong, Rizal. In 1936, Maria Villafrancisco was appointed as the first Filipino principal of the School for the Deaf and the Blind, or the SDB. In 1945, the National Orthopedic Hospital opened its School for Crippled Children, or the NOHSCC, for young patients who had to be hospitalized for long periods of time. In 1949, Quezon City Science High School for Gifted Students was inaugurated. In the same year, the Philippine Foundation for the Rehabilitation of the Disabled, or the PFRD, was organized. Now let's move on to year 1950 to 1957. In 1950, Philippine Association of the Deaf, or the PAD, opened the School for Children with Hearing Impairment. The LC Gatchos Village, or the EGV, was established in 1953 in Alabang, Muntinlupa, Rizal to take care of abandoned and orphaned children and youth with physical and mental handicaps. The following year, in 1954, the first week of August was declared as Sight Saving Week. In 1955, members of Lodge Number 761 of the Benevolent and Protective Order of Elks organized the Elk Cerebral Palsy Project Incorporated. In the same year, the first Parent-Teacher Work Conference in Special Education was held at the School of Deaf and Blind. In 1956, The first Summer Institute on Teaching the Deaf was held at the School for the Deaf and Blind in Pasay City. The following school year marked the beginning of the integration of deaf pupils in regular classes. In 1957, the Bureau of Public Schools, or the BPS, of the Department of Education and Culture, or the DEC, created the Special Education section of the Special Subjects and Services Division. The inclusion of special education in the structure of Department of Education and Culture provided the impetus for the development of special education in all regions of the country. The components of the special education program included legislation, teaching training, census of exceptional children and youth in schools and the community, the integration of children with disabilities in regular classes, rehabilitation of residential and special schools and materials production. Baguio Vacation Normal School ran courses on teaching children with handicaps. The Baguio City Special Education Center was organized in the same year. For the continuation of our report, here is Mamoli and V. Bonifacio.
I am Molly Ann B. Bonifacio, and I will be reporting years 1960 to 1978. In 1960, some private colleges and universities started to offer special education courses in the graduate school curriculum. In 1962, PFRD sponsored the second Pan-Pacific Rehabilitation Conference in Manila that convened international experts in the rehabilitation of handicapped persons. The Manila Youth and Rehabilitation Center, or MYRC, was opened. The center extended services to children and youth who were emotionally disturbed and socially maladjusted. In 1963, with the approval of Republic Act No. 3562, the training of DEC teacher scholars for the blind children started at the Philippine Normal College. The Philippine Printing House for the Blind was established at the DEC compound with the assistance of the American Foundation for Overseas Blind, UNICEF, and CARE Philippines. In the same year, the Manila Science High School for Gifted Students was established. In 1964, the Quezon City Schools Division followed suit with the establishment of the Quezon City Science High School for Gifted Students. In 1965, marked the start of the training program for school administrators on the organization, administration, and supervision of special education classes. The first institute on the education and training of the mentally retarded was sponsored by the Special Child Study Center, the Bureau of Public Schools, and the Philippine Mental Health Association at the Ateneo de Manila University. In 1967, BPS organized the National Committee on Special Education, General Letter No. 213, regulating the size of special classes for maximum effectiveness. In 1968, Republic Act No. 5250, Teacher Training Program for Exceptional Children, started at PNU. The first Asian Conference on Work for the Blind was held in Manila. In 1969, classes for socially maladjusted children were held at MYRC. Jose Favela Memorial School was divided into 5 units. First is Philippine Training School for Boys in Tanay. Second is Philippine Training School for Girls in Alabang. Third is Reception and Child Study Center in Manila. Fourth is LC Gatches Village in Alabang. And fifth is Nayon ng Kabataan in Pasay. In 1970, Republic Act No. 5250, the Teacher Training Program for Children with Behavioral Problems, started at the UP. The School for the Deaf and the Blind was reorganized into 2 separate residential schools. In 1973, the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court of Manila established the Tahanan Special School for the socially maladjusted children and youth. In 1975, the Special Subjects and Services Division was abolished. In 1976, Proclamation 1605 declared 1977 to 1987 as the decade of the Filipino child. The National Action Plan for Education was promulgated, which included provisions for in and out of school exceptional children. In 1977, MEC issued Department Order No. 10 that designated regional and division supervisors of special education programs. In 1978, marked the creation of the National Commission Concerning Disabled Persons, or NCCDP, later renamed National Council for the Welfare of Disabled Persons, or NCWDP, through Presidential Decree No. 1509, MEC Memorandum No. 285 directed school divisions to organize special classes with a set of guidelines on the designation of teachers who have no formal training in special education. For the entirety of our report, here is Ma'am Jenny and Labao, our third reporter.
In the year of 1979, Caritas Medico-Pedagogical Institution for the Mentally Retarded and Hagnes Special Education Center in the Division of Bohol was organized. In the same year, the Bureau of Elementary Special Education Unit conducted a 2-year nationwide survey of unidentified exceptional children who were in school. In 1980, the School for the Crippled Children at the Southern Island Hospital in Cebu City was organized. In 1981, United Nations Assembly proclaimed the observance of the International Year of Disabled Persons. In 1982, 3 special schools were opened: Cebu State College Special High Schools for the Deaf, Siaton Special Education Center in the Division of Negros Oriental, and St. John Maria de Vianney Special Education Learning Center in the Quezon City. In 1983, Batas Pambansa Bilang 344 Accessibility Law, an act to enhance the mobility of disabled persons by requiring cars, buildings, institutions, establishments, and public utilities to install facilities and other devices. In the same year, the Batak Special Education in the Division of Ilocos Norte was organized. In 1987, Autism Society of the Philippines was organized. In 1990, the Philippine Institute for the Deaf, an oral school for children with hearing impairment, was established. In 1992, the summer training for teacher of the visually impaired started at the Philippine Normal University. The program was sponsored by the Department of Education and Culture, Department of Education, Culture and Sports, Resources for the Blind Incorporated, and the Christopher Blind and Mission. In 1993, DEX issued Order No. 14 that directed regional officers to organize the Regional Special Education Council. In 1995, the summer training for teachers of the hearing impaired was held at the Philippine Normal University. In 1996, the third week of January was declared as Autism Consciousness Week. Likewise, the first National Congress on Visual Impairment was held in Quezon City, and subsequently held every 2 years. The first seminar, workshop, and information technology for the visually impaired was held in Manila, sponsored by the RBI. The first Congress on Special Needs Education was held in Baguio City. In 1997, DEX ordered No. 26 on the institutionalization of special education program in all schools was promulgated. The first Wheelathon race for wheelchairs user was the main event of the 90th National Disability Prevention and Rehabilitation Week. In 1998, DEX ordered number reclassification of regular teacher and principal items to special education teachers and special schools principal item was issued. The following events took place in 1999. The Pilspada National Sports Competition for the Disabled in Cebu City, the Second National Congress on Special Needs Education in Baguio City, issuance of the following DEX ordered number 104, exemption of the physically handicapped from taking the National Elementary Achievement Test and the National Secondary Aptitude Test. Number 108 is strengthening of the special education program for the gifted in public school system. Number 448, search for the 1999 Most Outstanding Special Education Teacher for the Gifted. And Memorandum Number 457, National Photo Contest on Disability. In 2000, Memorandum Number 24, 4th International Noise Awareness Day. Every 4th week of November, National Observance of the Week of Gifted and Talented. That's number 11, 2000, recognized special education centers in the Philippines. And that is the history of special education, the historical background from the year 1902 to 2000. Thank you for watching.